Thank you, MP Dawes. I'm going to invite the leader of the opposition to close out the presentations in this morning's press conference.
Still morning. Good morning, everyone, members of the media, listeners, my colleagues who are here. We wanted to have this press conference this morning. It's the second press conference we've had since the hurricane hit Jamaica. First one was about a week after the hurricane hit. We're now about 4 weeks since that date, 3 weeks since the press conference. And I wanted to have the elected representatives of the people in the constituencies that have been extremely badly affected to have the chance. I wanted to give them a chance to describe to the media and the public what they're experiencing and the deficiencies in the response, the gaps that need to be filled, and the decisions that need to be taken. This is not to be anything other than responsible representatives of the people to bring to the attention of the authorities and the public what needs to be done to make the overall response more effective. We know that there are hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been turned upside down by this cataclysmic event. And the effects of that event are ongoing. We talk about phases and initial response morphing into recovery and other phases. But the truth is that because of the very ad hoc arrangements that have been put in place thus far, the level of normalcy and stability that have returned to the lives of people in the badly affected areas is very erratic. Some people have received relief because of good fortune, happen to be living in close to the major arterial roads, or they have had the benefit of interventions from international and local NGOs and disaster relief organizations. But many, many others have had little or no interventions. And so the situation is not an even one. And there are far too many people still who are suffering from the initial effects of the hurricane. The opposition, as I said at the first press conference, and I want to repeat it now, we must not seek to score political points as a competitor of the government. This is not the time for that. We've just gone through a general election barely 2 months ago. This is a time when Jamaica is facing a huge disaster, an economic disaster, a social disaster, a humanitarian disaster. And the role of the opposition at a time like this is to help the government to respond as effectively as possible, because we want Jamaica to get back on its feet. We represent people who need that to happen. So when you see us perhaps disagreeing with the government on a particular issue, it is not as a result of being cantankerous or being trivial or petty. We take issue with those things that we think are fundamental and that we should not allow to be implemented in the originally proposed way, because it will have a deleterious effect. It will have an effect on the governance of the country or on the response to the disaster, which is suboptimal and needs to be improved. And that is how we have been attempting to approach this. Equity, transparency, and accountability are vital in the response to a disaster. We have heard numerous reports that political representatives of the governing party are being used to distribute government relief, taxpayer funded or donor funded through the government relief in ways which they have no legal or political standing constitutionally to play that role. Elected representatives must be included in things that are happening in their constituency so that they have information, so that their information can be shared with those who are operating on the ground, and you can work together with all stakeholders, including those who are representing the other side of the political fence, to get the best possible solution in a difficult situation. That is not happening. I have been bringing these incidents as I hear of them. I have been bringing them to the attention of the Prime Minister through WhatsApp. He has not responded to me at all since last week, the Saturday before last, 10 days ago. I have not heard from him in response to any of my messages. So when the Minister of Information says that we have been communicating constantly, that is simply untrue. There has been a total cessation of any communication, certainly in my direction, from the Prime Minister. I note that there's a decision that has been taken to enact legislation to establish a new reconstruction agency, the acronym NARA, National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, I believe, which will have wide powers to ensure that decisions can be taken very quickly when it comes to rebuilding, for example. I know that this is something that the private sector have been agitating for, and I see the need for it. But where you are circumventing normal procedures because the circumstances that we're in require that, it is all the more important that the thing be done in a transparent manner and that all critical stakeholders should be at the table when those decisions are being taken or being reviewed. The Prime Minister, in making that announcement, spoke of a broad-based governance structure for this new authority. I had called for something of that nature right after the hurricane. I wrote to him about it. However, I noticed that he, at his press conference when he announced it, he made no mention of the opposition being at the table. I don't know whether that omission was inadvertent or deliberate, but I can tell you that if we want Jamaica to get back on her feet as quickly as possible, if we want to avoid social dislocation, and if we want people to feel that the response is equitable, is well designed, and is without political bias, it is important that critical stakeholders be at the table. And the opposition, with 28 seats in the parliament and almost the same number of votes in the last election as the government, should be part of that process. We are willing to serve, but we are currently being excluded. All of the committees that have been established under the cabinet, including the private sector committees and so on, the opposition is not present on any of those committees. The one concern I have as well is in the way in which the post-Melissa response effort is being administered. Jamaica has a robust legal framework for responding to disasters. The National Emergency Response legislation called the Disaster Risk Management Act, which we passed in 2015 and which the government used extensively during the pandemic. Despite the Constitution having provisions for states of national disaster to be declared, and there's a constitutional framework for addressing it, the government preferred to use the disaster risk legislation to respond to the pandemic. What we have seen in relation to this disaster is that it is effectively being marginalized, partly because ODPEM, which is a critical institution within that legislative framework, has been denuded of authority, status, and capacity over the last decade. And this is unfortunate because the legal framework which exists in Jamaica is well designed in accordance with international standards. And it contemplates responses being at the national level, at the parish level, through the municipal corporations, which used to be called parish councils, and at the community level. They're all supposed to be integrated so information can feed its way from the ground up seamlessly to the National Emergency Committee, NEOC, the National Emergency Operations Center, and decisions can be made on the basis of complete information or the best possible information, and then directed and resourced through that structure so that the ground gets the benefit of being comprehensively included in whatever the relief is. What we have seen is that structure is not functioning. The parish councils have not been engaged and resourced so that they can play their part, despite them having disaster professionals and other professionals available to them to play the role they're supposed to play. And instead, we're seeing parallel structures being put in place, which are essentially running alongside the legal structure that exists, and have in many cases superseded them, but without proper coordination. Those parallel structures are those set up by cabinet, and also those involving our international partners, the NGOs and others, without whom we'd have been in an even worse situation than we are now. We're grateful to all of the agencies that have been here putting a lot of effort, but the coordination needs to be sorted out. And the legal structure that exists to ensure that relief is distributed fairly, equitably, and comprehensively based on the best possible information on the ground, that needs to be activated properly and not circumvented. I close by reiterating that we have value to bring to the table in the response to this disaster. We have representatives at the local government level. We actually have more representatives at the local government level marginally than the government do. We have a substantial number of representatives at the parliamentary level. They are all on the ground getting information daily from residents as to what is happening. The political organizations of both parties go into every nook and cranny of the country, and therefore the organizations are well placed to get information to feed into the disaster response system. That is not being leveraged. That is an asset that the country has, and which the disaster legal framework contemplates being engaged, but is not being engaged and is being marginalized. And that is why we're having suboptimal results, where people are still a month after the disaster feeling abandoned by the government because they haven't seen anything happening to take them out of their plight. The housing situation, we've heard the announcement about the 5,000 container homes that will be brought in and distributed through the NHT. That is not likely to come into effect based on what the Prime Minister himself said until the second month of next year. In the interim, what is the solution for the people who have no shelter? The thousands of Jamaicans who are coming into the Christmas period, every time it rains, them wet up. Their children, old people, pregnant mothers, persons with disabilities. What is going to happen to them? I said at the last press conference, in response to a question from the media, off the cuff, I was asked what did I think would be an appropriate figure to empower the constituencies with. I'd said 50 million. Certainly, a $50 million allocation would allow MPs to respond to the huge need in a more meaningful way. Instead, they've been put in this invidious situation where essentially they're asked to allocate to 100 people when the needs of their constituents are thousands of people. And that simply is just a recipe for a lot of frustration and bitterness. The government needs to wheel and come again with this and rapidly put in place a response on the ground to the shelter needs. It is an opportunity also to run some income on the ground where people have lost their jobs or their businesses have been closed and get the economy moving. We could have mobilized brigades of people who need income to help with the cleanup, which is now very sporadic, and needs to be dealt with the public health risks that Dr. Dawson has spoken to again, and also with the shelter issues. Let us mobilize people on the ground, have some money flowing through those communities, get the economy back at the grassroots level so that people can have some hope and so that the needs of the people are being addressed in a efficient and quick way. We will play our part if we are allowed to do so, but we bemoan the misinformation being fed about the role we're playing. We are feeling very excluded from all decision making, and the way in which the system of relief is operating on the ground is not in accordance with established norms, and is also resulting in suboptimal distribution of relief because the relief is not being done on the basis of proper information as to the needs. So that is why we will be having regular press conferences going forward, because we're now at a time when the country needs to change gear in a forward direction, and we feel that the government needs to be guided by persons who are in the feeling it on the ground, the neglect and so on. And it's our role, I think, to do that. The Parliament doesn't lend itself, as currently managed, to having that kind of open dialogue, that opportunity to share what we have to say. So we will have to do it in this manner and other manners. So I thank the media for having given us this time, and we look forward to partnering with you as we play our part in getting Jamaica back on her feet. God bless Jamaica, land we love. One Jamaica, unity is a must. Let us pull together and rebuild our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you again to all our speakers who presented. We'll provide the opportunity for members of the media to raise questions. So please identify yourself and the individual to whom you are putting the question. So, yeah, journalists from Nationwide.
Good morning, everyone. Mahiri Stewart, Nationwide News. Mahiri Stewart, Nationwide News here. My first question is a bit of the opposition. Question to the opposition in terms of the allocations that are being given to the members of parliament in order for them to rebuild. We're hearing in terms of the housing that the 10 million isn't enough based on how many people in the constituency are affected. I know that there was a suggestion earlier in terms of a fixed figure. You said it was off the cuff as 50 million, but in terms of given the different characteristics of the constituencies and the different amount of persons affected, do you think a fixed figure would be more relevant, or would it be based on the constituency?
I don't think in this situation it's sensible or realistic to have a one-size-fits-all basis for allocation. All constituencies have some needs because the hurricane did have impact on everywhere, but the degree is on a huge differential curve. And clearly, those constituencies, which we know from the mapping that's been done and the data that we have, where the extensive damage is, should get realistic allocations in keeping with the extent of the damage and loss that they have suffered. And every MP, I think, would accept that that's fair and reasonable. And so when I throw out a number, I'm not suggesting that every constituency must get the same thing. But I do think that those that are suffering the most, and every MP who has spoken here is in a constituency where there is extensive loss and damage and dislocation. They need to be adequately resourced and included in the process so that the people can feel that the state is responding in a serious way, in an efficient way, and in a fair and equitable way to the disaster that has befallen their lives.
All right, so in light of that, would you think it would be fair if the MPs would do their assessment and determine a figure based off of the damage that they have seen on the ground?
I think that we don't need to go through a scientific survey of the damage in advance of providing relief. It is well known the extent of damage that there is. It's easy to have a preliminary figure, which you know is not going to be the end number that's needed, but is a decent start, and get going with that. A month has passed. Children need to get back in school, but people are still living in shelters in schools that are badly damaged. Teachers and the Ministry of Education want those people to leave. Nothing is put in place for them to go to. And now the MPs are being told, we must deal with it, but no resources are being provided. So it's a crazy situation. And it requires a proper, well thought out response with everybody at the table who has value to bring to that decision. And that's what's lacking now.
My next question would be to Miss Perkis. I did do a story a few weeks back on the issue of the rising water in Chigwell, Forest, and Lethe. I think those are the three communities you had mentioned. In terms of since then, what can you say about the level of water that's in those communities and how are the constituents that live there? How are they doing right now?
All right, firstly, let me clarify that Lethe was not one of those areas marooned by water. Chigwell, the water continues to rise. Water is receding in forest, but it's going over to Chigwell. So it continues to rise in the Chigwell area.
Okay. And I guess this would be a question for all the MPs in general, but in terms of resources, specifically water, Dr. Dawes had spoken about the fact that contaminated water is an issue and people need potable, clean water in order to respond to the disaster. What can you say is the status of the restoration of water in your constituency? This is for all the MPs.
Well, our main booster systems have been damaged, mainly Great River. That has been repaired so far, but we do have booster systems in different areas that are still damaged. And I will use this opportunity to ask NWC to go in and pay some attention to those areas. We have a number of rivers in Eastern Hanover. Persons are drinking water from the springs. I don't believe it is safe. I have warned against it. But when we have officials going into the communities that are vulnerable, the experts, and asking them same, I believe it is more effective than just a member of parliament saying, don't consume the river water, don't consume the spring water.
I just want to add to what Member Perkis said a while ago in terms of water. Yeah. Um, yes. In the majority of these constituencies that are affected by Hurricane Melissa, the system is served by the Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS. And the majority of those systems are still out as we speak. The government speak to deploying generators across the country in these areas. There's still a lot of areas that are without these generators as we speak. So in terms of the water infrastructure, because out of the 227 systems we have across the country, they're all independent. There's no linkages. So therefore, the majority of these stations act independently, operate independently. So there's no synergy between, as we speak now, I know that the JPS is trying to repair a lot of these stations along with hospitals and fire station and other entities. But as far as water goes, because of the electricity from the JPS, a lot of these areas are still, in a lot of these plants across the country, across the different constituencies are still out as we speak. So individuals have they're going to rivers, streams, which the water is unsafe as we speak.
And has water been trucked in terms of the places
Well,
that
the
don't have running
government
water?
provided $2 million to each MP to truck water, but here again, I want to add and say that an average cost for a truckload of water is anywhere between 40,000 and 60,000. So if you look at it, that can only do basically in a constituency, you can basically truck anywhere between 30 and 40 loads of water, and that's what you're supposed to be trucking daily. So the $2 million roughly is a drop in the bucket as we speak.
Okay.
Could also just add that in some of the badly hit areas, the containers that people use to store water have been badly damaged. Black tanks have been destroyed and so on. So even when you are trucking water, there's a problem as to what you do with it. That needs to be considered in responding to the water crisis.
I just want to add that the logwood treatment plant suffered damage, right, shortly after Melissa. Power has been restored. The generator there was damaged. I want to urge the government to ensure that this process to procure the generator starts immediately, despite JPS has restored power to the plant. This plant feeds majority of Hanover and parts of Westmoreland. And so it is important that there is a generator there. I know there was generator was rented during the time until power was restored only recently. But as you know, there are times when the JPS will go down. And as such, it is important that we start the process of procuring a generator for that plant.
Thank you. Do we have any other question online? All right, thank you so much. I want to especially thank you.
Online.
We have a question online.
Online.
Yeah.
Yes, I am online. This is